There was an old hymn that I really liked as a kid. It really stuck out to me. The name of the hymn was "Take It to the Lord in Prayer." You guys remember this, don't you? A very good hymn. The lyrics went, "What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry." Although when I read the words, it's hard for me not to say privilege, because that's how the hymn breaks it up. "But I will persevere. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer." Now, obviously, this song can be misunderstood to be talking about the way that, there's no struggle, there's no pain, and prayer fixes everything. That's not what the song's saying. That's not what the Bible says. Okay, there's still going to be struggle. You're still going to be bearing pain, and prayer is not going to fix everything in your life. You're still going to have ups and downs, right? However, even in that despair that we face, it's going to hit you different when you're in prayer. What the song says it says, "Oh, what peace we often forfeit." There's a lot more peace that is accessible to us. But with prayer, think of it like this. Is a sliver of peace better than the whole of peace? I said that wrong. Is it better to not have any peace if you only get a sliver of peace? Well, of course not. When you go to prayer, you might not have complete peace, but you'll have a lot more peace than you would have had without prayer. And when you go to God in prayer, there's needless pain that you're bearing, in the sense that, let's say, with prayer it's a 3, and let's say without prayer it's a 10. So that means those 7 points are needless pains that you're bearing. See what I mean? And the song always really stuck out to me. But life hits different with prayer. Life is like a big meal. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of stuff in that meal. There's going to be the parts that you really enjoy, like the steak, and then the parts that you really don't enjoy, like the kale, that they tell you is a superfood or whatever, but you know it's poison. And there might not be scientific data to prove that out, but we know it's poison. That kale is meant to kill you one bite at a time. That's the reason why Pizza Hut had it around the pizzas on the. That's all it was good for. It wasn't good to eat. But that's life. It has goods and bads, and you just kind of take the whole thing together. And but a big meal hits a lot different when you exercise, doesn't it? You're out there, you're burning a bunch of calories, you're doing a hard job, you're building a fence or something, and you go eat a huge meal, it doesn't hit you as hard. But you sit around on your butt all day watching TV and you have a big meal, ooh, it's going to hit you hard. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel it real bad. You're going to feel it tonight, you're going to feel it tomorrow. And for those unfortunate people who have things like IBS, you're really going to feel it tomorrow. But when you exercise, it changes it. And that's kind of what prayer's like. That's a lot like what prayer's like. Life's going to hit you either way, but it hits you differently with prayer. So let's look at Luke 18. I've been teasing this passage for a while, and here we are. We have arrived safely to look at it. Now, he told them a parable on the need for them to pray always and not give up. There was a judge in a certain town who didn't fear God or respect people. And a widow in that town kept coming to him, saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." For a while, he was unwilling. But later, he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or respect people, yet because this widow keeps pestering me, I will give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. Do anything to get this woman off my back. Then the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his elect who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay helping them? I tell you that he will swiftly grant them justice. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Now, obviously, this story is a story of a widow who keeps asking over and over again, which brings up that question that many of us have throughout the course of our prayer life. Well, hold on. I thought we weren't supposed to say the same thing over and over again and ask for the same things over and over again in prayer. I thought it was kind of like a one and done. If I mentioned it to God, why do I have to keep repeating it? There's a lot there, but let me just say this. The microphone committed suicide. Let me just say this. Yes and no. And we're going to have to look at this more next week, but we're actually going to that's all we're looking at next week in Matthew, because there's just so much time and energy that needs to go into that. So for today, let's just focus on what Luke 18 has for us to learn from this story. So as we back up to verse 1 again, it says, "Now he told them a parable on the need for them to pray always and not give up," which, is an amazing thing for him to say because of this. How many times have we asked, God, show me your will? What is your will? What is God's will for you? It's to pray. Look what 1 Thessalonians says. "Rejoice always, pray constantly, give thanks in everything, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." Now you don't have to wonder anymore. That's God's will. Well, what happens when all this stuff is pray? That is God's will for you. In any and every situation, prayer is God's will for you. Now you might say, well, that doesn't really help me know what step to take in this way. It sounds like that, but I would argue the exact opposite. I would argue the exact opposite. I'd say that when you are in God's will in prayer, it's really hard to be out of his will in life. Did you hear what I just said? When you are in God's will in prayer, it's hard to be out of his will in life. It's not going to be something that you just magically misstep and all of a sudden this knife that you were walking on, you've fallen off. Whoops, I accidentally misstepped. My life is forever ruined because I accidentally stepped out of God's will. You stay in God's will with the things you know. What you don't know, God will lead you through. In all seasons that you're in and all times that you're in, stay in prayer. That's God's will. As Keith Green said it, make my life a prayer to you. Make my life a prayer to you. David the psalmist in the book of Psalms says this in numerous, well, not in the same words, but he used very similar words throughout the Psalms. But still, the interesting thing about Luke 18, which I don't think we oftentimes take it into consideration, but Luke 18 is not a parable talking about praying generally. It's not talking about generally when you pray. It's talking about a very specific context of prayer. And you might say, well, what is the context of prayer? Well, lucky for you, you don't have to guess. Because if you just turn to the verses before Luke 18:1, you find yourself in chapter 17. And what Luke 17 is talking about is God's oppressed people in the end times. God's oppressed people in the end times. So, in other words, it's something like this. There's going to be these end time struggles. One's going to be taken, one's going to be left. These are the things that are going to happen when the end comes. And then he says, so I want you to stay in prayer and to not give up. Luke 18:1 is not disconnected from Luke 17, whatever that verse is, 30-something or whatever. It's not disconnected. See, in the original Greek, there were no separations between chapter and verse. We added that. So that way we could find references easier. This is why I tell people it doesn't matter if you always remember the reference, the scripture reference. It matters that you remember the word. So if you have to memorize a verse and you can't remember exactly if it's Luke 12:1 that you memorize or some other verse, I don't really care. Remember what the word actually said, though. That's the part that's important. You see what I'm saying? So in this part, he's talking about God's oppressed people, therefore, stay in prayer. And you can see this in the way that the parable ends. In verse 8 of chapter 18, the very tail end of the verse says this, nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes. That's not out of what he's talking about. That's not like a passing comment. He was talking about the return of the Son of Man. He was talking about the end times. And then he tells this parable to tell them to stay in prayer. And then at the end of the parable, he says, now when the Son of Man comes, when the end comes, is he going to find faith on the earth? He's still talking about the same thing. Unfortunately, this verse has kind of been ripped away from that context and just kind of applied to every single situation. And so how does Luke 18 talk about? Well, Luke 18 really tells us, though we wait, we know he's going to act. Right now we wait, we know he's going to act. So obviously, the big question, which I think most of us will have at this point, so if Luke 18 is talking about praying for justice in the face of persecution in the end times, Does it still apply to prayer, generally speaking? Well, like most things, it's not that simple. So I'm going to say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that God's nature is the same. Regardless of whatever we're praying for, God's nature is the same. He's a caring God. He's a present God. All those things, yes, that's him. Okay? Yes. However, this is talking about a promise from God, whereas we can't name and claim promises wherever we see them. So that brings us to, does this prayer apply generally? No. And the reason it doesn't is because we can't nag God into getting our way about everything. This verse is not saying anytime you have a need for anything, you pray and ask over and over again, and enough times that God will be so irritated with you that he'll give you whatever you want. That's not what this, no. He specifically said justice. Now, whereas we are called, and we're going to get to this next week, we are called to stay in prayer, to make petitions to God, to keep taking it to God in prayer. Absolutely. We can't stand on this verse and take it out of context and say, therefore, I'm going to name and claim every single thing that I want, and I'm going to get it eventually because God's going to get tired of me. In fact, if our mindset is, I'm going to keep on going until God's so sick of me he's going to answer my prayer, we've missed the whole point of this parable. Because the point is not that God gets sick and tired of our prayers. Is God the unjust judge? No. He was compared to him as an extreme example. A lot of the Bible, let me help you understand 95% of the Bible. A lot of the Bible is a book of extremes. Do you know what that means? That means instead of giving you an average Joe example, it's going to go to 150, right? So the book of Job is a great example of this. Is it a story about a guy that was pretty good? No, he was the most righteous guy in the whole land. He really had his act together. It wasn't just average Joe, right? And it wasn't just his neighbor that was bullying him. It's Satan himself that tries to fight against him. It's a book of extremes. Well, the whole Bible is like that. The whole Bible gives us extreme examples because we're kind of hard-headed and we need to know things, but we don't really want to learn things. So God has to kind of say it in such a way where even we can get it. Does that kind of make sense? So, yes, okay, let's move on now, okay? Now, it says here in... It said in 18:1, let me flip back to it here. I kind of lost my place. Sorry. Slide 10, Grace. In verse 1, it says, now he told them a parable and the need for them to pray always and not give up. And so let's ask a question about what this and means. Well, what does this mean? Is it a contrast? Either you will pray or you're going to give up. Or is it a this and that? Pray and also not give up. The implication being that you can pray having already given up, or that you cannot pray and still not give up. And I would say I think it's a little bit of both. Because, and this is my reason for that, can you say words without faith? Can you pray without faith? Why would we be told to pray in faith if we can't pray without faith? I can say meaningless words, can't I? Now I lay me down to sleep, something my soul to keep. You know the one I'm talking about. And just say the same thing because that's what we're supposed to say, right? I can just say it out of rote memory and not even have to think about what I'm saying. Right? Well, would you say that as a prayer of faith, or would you say those are just saying words? Well, if there's no faith exhibited in the prayer, if there's no belief, no trust, just words, I would say that would be words without faith. So in that sense, you can see it that pray always or you're going to give up. But in the other sense, you could say, well, yeah, but words reveal your faith. And that's true, and we're going to look at that in just a second. Words do reveal your faith. How do you know that there's faith in your life? Because it comes out. Jesus said it like this, from the inside, good, man gives good. There's a product that is showing from the good. Thank God somebody picked up on it. Sometimes I reference Nacho Libre and Well, anyways. So, okay, let's get a little bit practical with this. Maybe we've lost the forest for the trees here, okay? So let's make it a little bit practical. Did you know that there are studies that have been done, let me say it differently. There are studies that have been done that show, that's what I'm trying to say, that having an active prayer life improves anxiety. As in, it makes the symptoms less present, not it makes you have more anxiety. It also improves feelings of loneliness. And by that, once again, I mean you don't feel as lonely, not it helps you to feel more lonely. That's what I'm saying. This is one of the sources from that, if you want to look this up for yourself. There's a whole list of things that it lists, is the National Institute of Health, NIH.gov, which is available online. That is a very much so recognized authority on this. And, this is a what's it called? Secular source. This is not like a Christian thing trying to rewrite facts. This is secular things, and there's even saying that this is having benefits. And so in that way, we could say, yes, if you continue in prayer, you're less likely to give up. So I think it means both. Let's move on to verse 2. Verse 17. Slide 17 there. There was a judge in a certain town who didn't fear God or respect people. And a widow in the town kept coming to him, saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." So she's going to him again and again and again, saying the same thing over and over and over again. And there's something I think that this verse is telling for us, and that's that in life, you remember I've said for a couple weeks that you can either become bitter or a prayer warrior. Well, I'd add another little complicated step to this simple thing that I've said, and that's this. You can either take it to God or you can take it to people. See, the widow could have taken it to her friends, to different people about how I'm being wronged. I'm a victim. She could have told everybody about how hard she had it. Right? Isn't that kind of what we do nowadays? I'm a victim. Woe is me. Everything's not going my way, so I'm a victim. Cry for me. We can do that. But what she shows us is instead she took it to the judge. Knowing that her odds were very slim, she still took it to the judge. And her odds were obviously slim because she didn't really have somebody stand up for her, and the judge was a very shrewd guy. In fact, the word there, unjust judge, which is a little bit of a contradiction. We'll get to that in a minute. But that word there is, think back a couple of chapters before when it said the shrewd manager in chapter 16 or 17, maybe 15, wherever that was. It's kind of the same idea there. So if you take it to God in prayer, there's some things that happen that are very good things. First off, God hears you, and you get comfort. Well, that sounds good. Well, then what happens? He gives you what you want? Maybe, maybe not. He does answer, but maybe not in the way that you were hoping or wanting, but he does answer. Sometimes he changes you. Sometimes he changes what's around you. He answers. And then a very interesting thing happens. God has touched you, and you're able to start reaching out to other people because you get more and more freedom as you go to God more and more with it. It's still bothering you, but you keep going and taking it to God, right? The other option is that you don't, and you take it to others, and you make yourself the victim, and look how I've been wronged. And they either A, get upset at you. That Danny, he's always complaining, right? They get mad at you. Or, and I don't even know if this one's better, they join you in your anger. And now you've got a little bit of a problem because you have spread your bad attitude to others, and they are now joining in your offense. Have you ever had somebody chew you out because they heard something from somebody else about you, and they thought that it was true, and they never even once talked to you about it? Have you ever had that happen? Well, me neither. I just, Yeah, I think we all have, right? I mean, yeah. Where people just kind of make up a story, and now they're talking to this other person. You're just thinking, what? That's not what happened at all. So then what happens as they join you in your offense? They do this thing that is now your fault. They repeat your attitude. See, I'm mad at Fabby. So now Gracie's mad at Fabby. They didn't even have a fight, but now my attitude is spread, so now we're mad at her. That's not good. And so what is the outcome of such a tragic sequence of events? They go on to mistreat others. You have now inspired somebody else to mistreat somebody. You've spread your attitudes, now they are in a conflict with someone else that has nothing to do with them. How many times, and don't answer this, how many times has a family member said about how somebody has wronged them and you were instantly on their side? You don't know the facts. You didn't go and follow the details. They said it, so you're like, yep, I'm there. Let's go mess somebody up, man. You know, we're already there. We're like, let's go to war over this thing when you have no idea what you're talking about. Sticking your nose where it does not belong. You have no idea what you're talking about. And in our culture, we say something like this, which has always amused me because this is not a biblical idea at all. We looked at this in the book of Nehemiah, but, you know, sometimes we have to be told things a couple times. I'm not responsible for them. I'm not responsible for what they do. Well, yeah, you are. You wouldn't have been responsible for them if you hadn't have given them a bad attitude. But since you opened your mouth and caused a problem, yeah, now it's your fault because you instigated it. You were the pot stirrer person. So in this story, we're compared to a widow who has nowhere else to go, and God is compared as an opposite. Okay? We're not compared as an opposite. God is compared as an opposite. And this is a way of basically saying, if this is true in a lesser case, how much more is it true in a more superior case? This is basically the entire argument of the book of Hebrews. So if you just read through Hebrews, you're going to see this repeated over and over again. But here he's using that same thing, and he's compared to an unjust judge. So it says it says in verse. Let me back up here before I get there. It says here, there was a judge in a certain town who didn't fear God or respect people. So right there you're thinking, this doesn't sound too good. It's probably not real good. Even the way that he's talked about an unjust judge, that's a bit of a contradiction, isn't it? Isn't a judge there for justice? So if they're unjust, isn't that the exact opposite of what they're there for? And, this is clearly in denial of the Old Testament. The Old Testament talks repeatedly about the way that people are supposed to, or judges are supposed to bring justice, the answer to God, how you're supposed to watch out for widows and orphans. This guy's not following that at all. I think that he needs Jesus and a Bible. Yeah, he needs that. And the interesting thing about this is, religious people, they'll do things just because they're afraid of God. Right? They're afraid of what will happen if they don't do it. I'm going to pay tithes because I'm afraid that God might remove my prosperity if I don't. I'm going to go to church because I'm afraid that if I don't, God's going to cause something bad to happen. Now, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying it's the way it is. It's just the way it is. When people go to... when religious people kind of do things in repetition just because they're afraid, versus the humanitarian, which doesn't really care about God, right? They'll say, let's go build water wells in Africa, and then we're done. Like, that's it. We've built the water well. Now we can all go home. There's no, Jesus or anything. It's just humanitarian efforts, which will always be more humanitarian efforts. I'm not saying you shouldn't be a humanitarian. I'm not saying that. But humanitarians do it more because either they feel guilty, or because they love people, or because they respect others, or because they care. But whatever it is, they have some reason for why they're doing it. This judge did neither. What moved this judge then? If he wasn't moved by being afraid of God, and he wasn't really moved by I want to make so-and-so happy. I don't really care. Whatever. So what did move him? Well, we go on to verses 4-5 and we read this. For a while, he was unwilling. But later he said to himself, even though I don't fear God, even though I don't respect people, yet because this widow keeps pestering me, I will give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. I'm reminded of the story in Judges where, Samson, his woman Delilah keeps nagging him over and over again until finally he's just like, fine, it's my hair. Just leave me alone. It's my hair. And to make it maybe a little more modern reference, there was a show on TV called Chuck. And in Chuck, he's talking about the way it's a show about spies, and they're saying, well, this spy isn't going to break and give the information, is they, or are they? And the other spy says, people always break. In time, people always break. And I think that kind of summarizes what's going on here. And so, what was his basis for his action himself? The judge didn't act for God. He didn't act for others. He acted for himself. Now, the sad thing is we oftentimes see God like this. We do go to God in prayer and we say something along the lines of this. If only I could convince you to listen. If only I could show you how much I need you to answer me on this. If only I could pray such a prayer that would move you. I know that you can do it if only you'd care. We start at that basis of thinking that he's an uncaring, unjust judge. And then we go to God in prayer in complete despair because we've started with the point that he is not caring. God is not the unjust judge. They're saying this is an opposite extreme. So if it's true for an opposite extreme, how much more is it true for God? If this unjust judge can cave in and do the right thing, then why on earth would the good judge of all the earth not do that? It's an extreme example. So why then doesn't God answer me every single time? I have no idea, and I highly suspect that there's not one answer. I highly suspect there's a lot of different answers, and maybe even different answers for different circumstances. But I will say this. With kids. I have kids. Did you know that? So as a result, I have a lot of examples about kids. They say that you say what you know, and I would say that's true. Yeah, you definitely teach what you know. It's very hard for somebody who's never been in a successful marriage to have a marriage counseling class, isn't it? Oh my goodness. There's a story for another time. We'll move on. It's funny, but it has no connection with what we're talking about today, so I'll move on. But going back to the example of the kids, okay? Not just these kids, I'm talking about kids in general. It's okay and it's actually kind of good for your kids to suffer a little bit. Yeah, I said it like that on purpose because I wanted all the moms to say, but hear me out. Hear me out. Okay. Around 3 o'clock, this phenomenon happens where your child either gets that cookie or they will die. They didn't eat all their lunch because they weren't hungry. But now it's 3 o'clock. This isn't lunchtime anymore. This is 3 o'clock. And if they don't get that cookie, they're going to die. You wouldn't want your child to die, would you? But most of us as parents say something along the lines of this. We say, wait for dinner. And that makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense to make them wait for dinner. It's good for them to be a little bit miserable because then when they eat dinner, they eat the whole thing, don't they? So you can fill them up on snacks, which give them no nutritional value, or you can have them eat their dinner, which gives them all the nutritional value that they need. Well, which one is a good parent? Well, I would never make my child suffer. Well, you make them wait for dinner, right? So I'm just going to throw that out there, and then I'm going to move on, and you can do with that information as you will. But I strongly suspect that God has answers to these things that we will never even think of and we won't even see. For instance, in the book of Job, God never lays out a defense of why he acts the way that he does. But did you know that there actually is a little bit in the book of Job's why? There is a little bit of an answer of why righteous people suffer. You just have to kind of read between the lines. For instance, one of the reasons why righteous people suffer is because our ways are not God's ways. It's there. He just doesn't spell it out. You just kind of have to think about it. So, moving on. there are two things that are potentially being said here in the end of verse 5. He either said, so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. What does that mean, the persistent coming? And different translations are going to say this different. Is it either A, she's going to wear on him, like basically irritate him over time? That, as she continues to nag him over and over, he's just going to lose it. And maybe when he loses it, he's just going to start lashing out at people. Another way you can translate this is more in the sense of she's going to give him a black eye. She's going to shame him. She's going to ruin his reputation as a judge. People are going to think, that's that guy that doesn't even do his job. Why don't we give that job to somebody else? And the way that this is written, it can really be either one. You can't say this is how it should be translated. It's kind of both a possibility. And if you're anything like me, you probably hate that. But that's just the imprecise nature of language. Yeah. But either way, whichever way you translate it, the main point is the same. The main point is exactly the same. He's doing it for himself either way. He's not doing it so God leaves him alone. He's not doing it so, to make other people happy. He doesn't care. He's doing it for himself. That's long and short of it, however you want to translate it. And so then we get to verse 6, and it says this. Then the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Now, that verse has always stuck out to me. Why does Jesus say that? He literally just tells a story, and then he interrupts himself to say this. Listen to what that bad guy just said. You know that jerk in the story? Yeah, listen to him. What? See, the thing is, Jesus is drawing special attention to this because what he's saying is, listen to the way that even this jerk came to the right conclusion in the end. So if even a jerk can, let's move on to verse 7 and see how this applies to God. Will not then God grant justice to his elect who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay helping them? And I think the obvious answer there is, well, no. Because even if God is a giant jerk in the sky that we have to nag and manipulate him to doing all the right things, and all, he would still answer. Which is a good thing. That's a good thing. Because God isn't that jerk in the sky. So that means we don't have to do all that nonsense hoping that we might appease the gods into action. Did I light the incense or didn't I? See, God is compared to the opposite of the judge. He's a good judge. In fact, in the Old Testament, one of the biggest themes about God in the Old Testament is that he is a good judge. The judge over all the earth. The one that all the prophets were leaning on. That guy. Can you get justice from a terrible judge and not me? So when we get to the beginning of verse 8, this isn't the whole verse 8, it's just the beginning. It says, I tell you that he will swiftly grant them justice. He will swiftly grant them justice. So though the end delays, the justice doesn't delay. So then we get to the odd thing of, now what does that mean? Because Jesus said this parable 2,000 years ago, and for 2,000 years we've been trusting in him and waiting for him to give us justice, and we've never seen it. So what is this verse talking about? Well, hold on. There's two aspects of this verse that I want to highlight. The first aspect is that when the time comes, it's going to be done very quickly. It's like this. You know when you've got a doctor appointment that you were just dreading? How slow does time go? Isn't there about maybe 5 hours in every minute? It's probably something like that, right? You're just sitting there and you think, oh my God. And you're sitting in bed at night and you're thinking, okay, eventually. For some people, this is the dentist. For me, it's not the dentist. For me, it's regular doctors. I don't like dentists either. I'm just not as bothered by them. I mean, what's the worst they can do? Bust out my teeth, huh? No, the worst they can do is that, you know the drill. You know the one I'm talking about. That's the worst they can do. They don't even have to say anything. They just have to do that in the background. Like, watch them squirm. But, you're sitting there and you're nervous. And so then finally the day comes and you go into the waiting room. And you're waiting there for forever. And they make sure to tell you, get here at 9 o'clock because we do the thing that we're doing at 9:30. So you're there at 9 o'clock just like they told you to be. And then about 1:30 or so, he waltzes in and says, hey, so what are you up to? And I'm like, just waiting. What are you up to? What's going on? I don't know. Are we doing something? Did I miss the party, Doc? So, but then after you're in there and they're doing their thing, it's over. It's done. Just like that. It's done. If you've ever had a colonoscopy, let me make it a little more personal. You're drinking those 5 gallons of whatever you want to call it. Dirt. You're drinking your 5 gallons of dirt. And you don't think the night is ever going to end. And then you're done in the recovery room. They're like, okay, well, the doctor will be with you in a minute and you can leave. Oh, we're done. It's kind of like that. That's how God's justice is. It's that when the time comes, it's going to be done very quickly. We're waiting patiently, but then when the time actually comes, it's going to happen very quickly. All the warnings and through all the years about how the end is coming, about how, there's not much time, all of a sudden in 5 seconds it's going to make a world of difference. 5 seconds is going to change 2,000 plus years of waiting. 5 seconds. But then the second thing about this is that, yes, we suffer, we die, but we endure. And this is a partial vindication for us, that we continue to endure as things continue to go bad. And the church continues to endure over 2,000 plus years as things have continued to go bad. Well, not 2,000 plus years, 2,000 years. And another aspect of our partial vindication is the aspect that we will be going to heaven, even as we wait. And then in heaven, we will still be waiting. Revelations tells us that. We're still going to be waiting. But I think the company is going to make it worth it. And so we're partially vindicated, and their full vindication will come. So what's there to say? What left is there to say about these verses? Well, I think there's a few things. I think there's just a few things here. Is there a chance, if we don't watch out and be careful, is there a chance that there will not be any faith when Jesus returns? The end of verse 8 says this, nevertheless, when the Son of Man does come, will he find faith on the earth? And it sounds like what he's saying is, y'all better get your act together, because you're a hot mess, and when I come back, there's not going to be a church left. And that's not what he's saying, I don't think. I think it's more of a challenge. Keep it up. Keep going. Because the Bible says that he will return for his people. How can he return for his people if there's no people to return for? Right? That makes sense, right? So I really don't think he is saying there will not be any faith. Though there possibly will be a lot fewer people of faith, and that's because A, they're being killed off by persecution, which is something we see even today. B, they grow tired of patiently waiting. Do you ever get tired of patiently waiting? Think of it like this. If you get tired in my long-winded sermons, how much more are you likely to get tired when you're praying? See what I mean? And a lot of times we say something like this, well, I don't get tired of praying and waiting. Then you're not praying and waiting for something big. Everybody gets tired of praying and waiting. Everybody does. And obviously there'll be fewer people of faith because of the problem of suffering and people abandoning faith because they just want the problem to be over, which leads us to a few final thoughts before we close out. And the first of them is this: giving up doesn't make the wait over, it removes purpose. Or you could say it like this: giving up removes purpose, it doesn't remove the delay. Let me kind of break that down for what that means. I'm going through this problem. I've been praying and praying and praying and praying, and God just won't answer. I'm just done. And so now the problem has resolved itself? Well, no, the problem's still there. Oh, so now you're going through the problem for no reason. Because it's not your faith growing, your trust in the Lord growing, it's not your rewards in heaven growing, it's now for nothing. You're going through the exact same thing that you would have, but for nothing. See, giving up does not remove, it does not remove the delay. It removes the purpose. See, God already hadn't answered before you went to God in prayer, right? Because if he had answered, you wouldn't pray for him, right? Right? You follow what I'm saying here, right? He has not answered, so you go to God in prayer. What is there to lose? You already don't have the thing that you asked for. Well, I'm tired of asking. Once again, what do you have to lose? You started out with nothing. You started praying. God didn't answer. You still have nothing. There's no reason to give up. You haven't lost anything. He already hadn't answered. The next of these finishing thoughts that I want to give is I've heard it said many times, many times. And, I'm sure you guys have too. Well, I prayed, but God didn't answer. Or he didn't answer how I wanted, either or. So I've learned that I have to pray more specific prayers. Have you guys ever heard this? I prayed and God didn't answer how I wanted. I learned that I have to pray more specific prayers. Have you guys heard this? By show of hands, who's heard that? So a couple? Yeah, okay, all right. Well, let's kind of look at that because I hear it quite a bit from people. I think there's 3 reasons why that kind of thinking is wrong. The first is that God is not Loki. Do you guys know who Loki is? In Norse mythology, there's like the different gods. There's Thor and Odin. Well, Loki is kind of like the one who kind of evil, but not. It goes beyond evil. It's more of just like evil is just like he does the bad thing, like Satan, right? But Loki isn't so much a trickster. That's what it is. Loki is more like a trickster. He'll do things just to screw with you. Just to screw with you. That's the idea of Loki. And I think sometimes this is kind of rubbed off in our prayer life with God. Well, I have to be real specific in prayer because God might not give me the thing that I've asked for. God isn't a divine jokester. He's not sitting there thinking, how can I manipulate your prayer into something you didn't really ask for? Okay, so, Paul is just now learning how to pray. And so now he's asked for his tummy to feel better. Well, I'll make it feel better. I'll take his tummy out. That's not God, right? He's not sitting there waiting to twist your prayer on you because you didn't pray just right. He's not a divine jokester. He's not Loki. And I think that this kind of mindset sees God as like this crazy force out there that we have to kind of rein in. Because left to his own devices, he's just going to screw things up. So we got to guide him and direct him. The second problem, I think, with this thing is, you know that you can't outsmart God? If God wants to do something, buddy, he's going to do it. You can't outsmart the guy. It's not like, oh, I pulled a fast one over on God this time. It's not like that. And also, along the same touch with that, you cannot possibly plan for every single contingency. You cannot plan for everything. Well, I've thought this situation out perfectly. I know everything that could possibly happen, and I formulated the perfect prayer to handle this, so that way I can't possibly not get the thing that I'm praying for because I took into account everything. You can't do that. It's impossible. Even if hypothetically you could do it for one thing, first off, that sounds tiring. Oh my goodness. I don't have the energy for that. But even if you could do that, okay, you're saying that every single prayer you're going to do that on? Yeah. And then the third thing, and this I think is more important than the other two. I don't think that your prayers have to be that specific because it's not the power or the perfection of your prayer. It is not the power of your prayer life. You just work yourself up and say, oh, Lord, and you get some guy, oh, Lord, and he's sweating real bad, and you're thinking, man, that's a powerful prayer. God must answer this one because he seems very, very invested in this prayer. And it's also not the prayer itself, that I've had all the right words, right? I've done the rosary, and I've said all the words, and I was sincere, and I said it in the right way, therefore God has to answer. It's not that either. It's not that at all. It's rather the God who hears the prayer. See, the emphasis here isn't on the prayer itself, it's on where the prayer is going. When Abraham had his servant leave the house, who did she say God was? Did she say, God is my prayer, or did she say, God is the one who hears? I'm out here in the desert. I can't find any water. You are the God who hears. Her prayer was that this is the God who heard me in the desert. And he's still hearing us in the desert. That didn't change. He's still the one who cares. He's still the one who hears us. But I think a lot of time we allow our pain and our suffering to warp our perception of God. Do you ever find yourself in a place in life that you're not happy with where you're at? You're like, I cannot wait to be out of this problem. Don't raise your hands. Yes. Yes, you do struggle with that. You're a person, absolutely. But in the midst of that desert, God is still the one who hears, and he's still the one who cares. Which is very important. Your faith is not on your prayer or on the goodness of the prayer, but rather on the goodness of the God who hears it. Because your prayers are not going to be perfect and in line all the time. They're just not. And this is the final thing I really want to leave with you. Although we obviously could always say more, it's probably about that time anyways. How is your faith shown? Think about this. How, in your life, how do you feel like your faith is shown? Well, as we read this parable, we don't have to guess how is my faith shown, because we saw here that as we patiently endure in prayer, the prayer is the way that our faith is shown. Faith is shown when we pray. Now let me read through this parable one more time and just listen. He told them a parable on the need for them to pray always and not give up. There was a judge in a certain town who didn't fear God or respect people. And a widow in that town kept coming to him saying, "Give me justice against my adversary." For a while he was unwilling, but later he said to himself, "Even though I don't fear God or respect people, yet because this widow keeps pestering me, I will give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming." Then the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his elect, who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay helping them? I tell you that he will swiftly grant them justice. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Well, I thought we were talking about prayer. Yes, we're talking about prayer. How is faith known and shown? Prayer. Read through it again as you see how it starts out, that they would continue and not give up, and then how it ends. Will I find faith on the earth? Well, are we talking about something different? No, we're still talking about prayer. We're still talking about prayer. We never stop talking about prayer. How is our faith shown? Through prayer. Faith shows prayer. Please join me in prayer. Now, I don't want to have a real long, drawn-out thing here. We're just going to pray for two things. If you need prayer for anything at all, come over to the front. We're going to pray for you. But then second, and I really want to say this, if you are getting weary in the waiting, you're waiting for God and you're waiting for God and you're just kind of getting a little bit weary in the waiting, we need to pray for you too, because God desires to strengthen you, because it is his will that you stay in prayer. But sometimes we need strength to stay the course. So if either of those groups are you just need prayer for anything, or you're getting weary in the waiting, either or, come up to the front. We're going to pray together as a church. And we're looking for God to answer, and we're looking for God to move. Everybody has their heads bowed, their eyes closed. We're not looking around. We're not judging anybody. But this is what the purpose of the church is, to be here for each other. Just give it a couple minutes. You find yourself weary, or you just need prayer for anything, healing or anything.